Snow drifted across the abandoned frontier road as a thin, trembling widow named Ilara pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her 5 children huddled close beside her, their lips blue and their feet bare against the frozen earth. They had been walking for hours, quietly, hopelessly, because hope was a luxury they had long ago traded for survival. Her youngest, barely 2, whimpered in her arms, his tiny fingers clinging to her dress. The older children followed silently, too exhausted to cry, their small ribs visible beneath their worn clothes. Ilara's husband had died months earlier in a mining accident, and ever since, life had collapsed like a house built on matchsticks. Work was scarce, food scarcer, and the town looked at them with a mixture of pity and inconvenience. But Ilara kept walking, telling the children they'd reach town soon, that maybe someone would give them a loaf of bread. She herself had eaten nothing in 3 days, giving every last crumb to her children. The snow began to fall heavier, and her vision blurred with dizziness as hunger gnawed like a beast inside her. Just when she thought she might collapse, she heard the distant thud of hooves. A horse emerged from the veil of snow, ridden by a tall cowboy with a dusted hat, his shoulders broad, his expression sharp but kind. He slowed his horse as he approached them, his brows tightening as he studied the frail family shivering in the cold. "Ma'am, and you look like you're walking straight through hell," he said gently. Ilara tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Her children clung to her legs like frightened shadows. The cowboy dismounted, stepping closer, taking in the hollow cheeks, the trembling mouths, the desperation. "When's the last time y'all ate?" he asked softly. Ilara swallowed hard, her throat tightening as tears burned behind her eyes. Finally, in a broken whisper carried away by the wind, she forced the truth out. "We haven't eaten in days." The cowboy froze, something fierce shifting in his eyes. Anger, disbelief, compassion all tangled together. Without a second thought, he reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a loaf of warm bread he'd bought moments earlier in town. He knelt before the children, breaking it into pieces with gentle hands. "Not anymore," he said quietly, firmly, with a vow buried in his voice. "Never again hungry. Not while I'm still breathing." Ilara watched in disbelief as the cowboy placed the warm pieces of bread into her children's freezing hands, his movements slow and gentle, as if afraid they might break under the weight of kindness. The children, Ilara hesitated only a moment longer before placing her trembling hand into the cowboy's strong, weather-warmed palm, and the moment their hands touched, something inside her cracked, relief, fear, gratitude all flooding out at once. He lifted her gently to her feet, then helped each child climb onto his horse one by one, holding them with the same care he might use for newborn colts. The horse stood patiently, as if understanding the weight of the moment, snorting softly as the smallest child curled against its mane. Ilara watched, stunned, as her children, who had spent days shivering, starving and hopeless now, sat bundled together on a real, horse like a small miracle forming before her eyes. The cowboy took off his coat without hesitation and wrapped it around Ilara's shoulders, ignoring her protests. "You're shaking like a leaf," he muttered. "Ain't no sense in you freezing half to death." When she tried to give it back, he just shook his head. "Ma'am, I've slept in snow deeper than my boots. I'll live." Then he guided her toward the horse, walking beside her while leading the reins. Each step they took away from that desolate road felt like stepping away from despair itself. The wind howled behind them, but ahead, the faint glow of lanterns flickered through the trees. His ranch, he explained, sat just beyond the ridge. As they walked, Ilara's legs grew weaker, exhaustion finally catching up with her now that fear no longer pushed her forward. The cowboy noticed her faltering steps and placed a steadying hand against her back, not touching too much, just enough to keep her from collapsing. Her voice wavered when she tried to speak. "Sir, you don't even know us." He glanced at her with a faint, almost sorrowful smile. "Don't need to. Hunger tells me everything I need to know. And you ain't just hungry for food, you're hungry for safety, for a home, for someone to give a damn." His words hit her harder than the wind. No one had spoken to her like that since her husband died. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. For once, she wasn't ashamed of being seen. The cowboy kept talking, maybe to distract her from the pain in her steps. He told her his name was Colton Hayes, that he lived alone on a wide stretch of land his father left him, that he wasn't used to company but didn't mind it. Not tonight. Not when lives depended on it. The children listened with wide eyes, clinging to every word like they were listening to a hero from a bedtime tale. When they finally reached the rise of the hill, Colton pointed toward a cabin glowing gold against the sweeping white snow. Smoke curled from the chimney, warm and inviting. "There," he said gently. "That's where you're sleeping tonight." Alara's breath caught, her knees buckling as relief overwhelmed her. A warm home, food, safety. She had forgotten what any of that felt like. Colton steadied her again, his voice rough but gentle. "Easy now. You're almost there. And ma'am, once you walk through that door, you ain't walking back into hunger. Not ever again. I swear it." Those final words, spoken with quiet certainty, wrapped around her, heart like a promise she had prayed for but never expected to receive. As Colton led them down the hill toward the warmly lit cabin, the wind softened as if even the storm respected the weight of what was happening, giving the small, broken family a rare moment of gentleness. The closer they drew to the ranch house, the more Alara felt her body trembling, not from cold now, but from the unfamiliar sensation of hope slowly returning to her veins. Her children leaned forward on the horse, their eyes fixed on the glowing windows like they were staring at heaven's doorway. When they reached the porch, Colton lifted each child down carefully, setting them on their feet as though they were precious, treasures too fragile for the world. He opened the wooden door and warm air poured out, rich with the scent of stew simmering over a fire. The children gasped softly as they stepped inside, their eyes wide at the sight of a sturdy table, thick blankets, and a fire crackling like it was welcoming them home. Alara lingered on the threshold, overwhelmed, unable to make her feet move. She had imagined safety so many times, dreamed of warmth, prayed for anything better than the empty cold. But now that it was here, she felt unworthy, afraid it would disappear the moment she stepped inside. Colton noticed her hesitation and walked back to her quietly, stopping just beside her without pressure or demand. "It's all right," he murmured, his voice softer than she'd yet heard it. "You ain't trespassing. You're welcome here. Truly." She swallowed hard, tears threatening again. I don't know how to repay you," she whispered. Colton shook his head slightly. "Ain't asking for payment. I'm asking you to come inside before you freeze." He extended his hand, not to pull her, just to guide her. Let her know she didn't have to walk the next step alone. With a trembling breath, Alara placed her hand in his, and he gently led her across the threshold. The warmth wrapped around her instantly, sinking into her skin, her bones, her soul. Her children had already crowded near the fire, rubbing their hands together, smiling for the first time in weeks. The smallest one reached for Colton's pant leg, and he bent down, brushing the child's hair back with a gentleness that made Alara's heart ache. He grabbed a stack of blankets from a chest and draped one around each child, tucking the corners like he'd been caring for children all his life. Then he ladled the thick, hearty stew into wooden bowls and handed them out, watching with quiet satisfaction as the children devoured every bite. Finally, he turned to Alara, who stood motionless, overwhelmed, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. She looked at the bowl he offered, then at him. "Why?" she whispered again, unable to stop herself. "Why do all this for strangers?" Colton held her gaze, his eyes warm with something steady and unshakable. "Because hunger steals more than food," he said quietly. "It steals hope, dignity, and sometimes it steals people who deserve better." He nodded toward her children. "They deserve better. And so do you." Alara's breath shuddered, a sob breaking free at last. She sank into the nearest chair,